Welcome to another edition of Account-Based Friday, and a hot topic right now, AEO generative search. You're in for a great conversation today, but before we get into the conversation with our special guest, first I just want to orient you around as you're coming into the lobby here. In the upper corner, you'll see a QR code. That QR code will bring you to over 400 episodes that my co-host Meg Hewer, who is a former head of research at Serious Decisions and CMO, Meg and I have been doing 400 plus of these go-to-market strategic videos with thought leaders, and today is no different. But if you have a question, you can certainly like and subscribe in the upper corner. It'll bring you right to our YouTube channel. Today's episode will also be recorded, so if you're not able to sit through entirety, you can replay it back at the B2B Fusion YouTube channel, or use that QR code, like and subscribe, and get notified to videos like these as they get posted. So with that, I would love to introduce our guest, Todd Paris, who's joining us from Colorado today. Todd's the CEO and co-founder of IQ Rush. Maybe Todd, for a proper introduction, maybe if you could just go into your background, and we can go for questions there. And I will also add one thing quick. If the audience has any questions, feel free to drop a question below, and we'll promote it up into chat to have Todd answer. So Todd, why don't you take it away with your background?
Sure. I have been in this space, in the ad space, for 25 plus years, so way too long. But worked places like Microsoft for a number of years, where I owned the product planning component for all of the ad tech stack. So everything from the ad server all the way up through to the UI that a marketer would use, so including ad products as well. So planning those within the dev teams. And then I worked for a number of years in GTM. So I took those ad products, amongst others, and then got them out to market, out to brands and marketers as well. And then I also sold advertising myself directly into CMOs, into marketers and agencies alike. And I did that when I ran the Asia Pacific time zone for Microsoft. So that was a great couple of years over in Asia as well. So that's all targeted towards the advertiser, the marketer, the CMO. And then the last 10 years or so, or more, 12 years, I've been doing a number of different startups. They're all focused on the same target customer, and they're all in the data and analytics space, enabling marketers to do their jobs more effectively. And now we have this company, this one, which I can certainly talk at length about, the generative space, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us, Todd. We really appreciate it. And I'm super excited for this topic because I think it's something that people really need to understand. And I think people want to understand and are working hard to understand. So your background, I think, will be very helpful to kind of getting people thinking about maybe some different things today. But before we talk about anything kind of different and cutting edge, let's start maybe with a few definitions. If you're a go-to-market leader, sales, marketing, customer success, name your favorite, tell me the definitions you think they need to know and their teams need to know right now in your space.
Yeah, I think maybe just set the table a little bit before jumping to a definition is that generative search, which I will define, is increasingly being used by consumers. So in order to be visible, all of those folks you're mentioning do need to be concerned with how am I showing up inside generative search. That will define as well. The projections are that by 2028 into 2029, the generative search will overtake traditional search. So some brands, marketers, et cetera, sit and they think, well, I'll let this play out and I'll kind of see where this goes, or maybe this isn't quite real. It's more than real, and it's happening quite quickly. So we like to talk about brands kind of getting active before they start to get closed out of being visible in search. So that is the table setting. So
and amen to that, by the way. All the data that I'm seeing right now and that I'm hearing from companies talking about their own data, where they're looking at how is the search, how are people finding them? It's changing by hundreds of % every month.
Absolutely.
That's kind of wild. That's fast.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk about this too, I'm sure, is with the right kind of optimizations, and we'll talk about what right kind is, you can move the needle pretty quickly in visibility. So we've seen some clients within 2 weeks start to be more visible, and then we increment or we track then going forward. So you can make it happen pretty quick, but yeah, brands definitely need to get busy for sure. So we've already said the word a couple of times, generative search. So kind of what is generative search? It is where users here would go into ChatGPT or Gemini or Perplexity, and they would type in a question, whatever the question would be, whatever part of the funnel the intent of that question is, then they get an answer back. So that answer, that is generative search. That answer is where we really want brands to start to appear inside the answer. And then also there, if you look at the end of the answer, there's a link. So that link or that hyperlink to the site, that is the totality of what generative search is. Now, to be part of that is very big and very complex. Systems or solutions like ours help simplify that as well. I'm sure we'll talk about that. So generative search is that kind of experience where you get an answer back, as opposed to traditional search, where there is really only one engine largely. Yes, Bing existed, Yahoo and others, but it's Google. And you go in and you type your blue link, short, pithy little comment, and then you get a blue link back and you start doing that searching. This is the opposite, more or less. The machine does the sorting, the looking, and then brings you back that answer that I was describing. So that's what generative search is, kind of at the highest level. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Cool.
And yeah, it's certainly things have evolved quite a bit here beyond Google. So I think that makes a ton of sense on how you describe it.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking too about the shift in the traffic, and to Meg's point about the 100% growth. I notice a lot of our clients are struggling right now with the measurement side of, traditional SEO, and now this new world. And we were talking even in the green room prior to coming live here about one of your co-founders being, very steeped in data analytics. But I'm curious, like, how should we be thinking about the measurement? Like, what's a vanity metric? What should we be looking at to see if this is working or not from a generative search perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe I could do a quick comment on my other co-founders. So my one co-founder was the first data scientist at Azure. And so he grew up at Microsoft, ended up leading all of data science for Azure, and then later led all of Oracle Cloud data science. So he's steeped in the math and the science, and that is the fundamental important element in being successful in being visible in generative search. And then my other co-founder most recently was the head of global analytics for Dentsu, one of the biggest media companies. And her entire background is focused on data and analytics. I say that just to set the stage for saying this. IQ Rush is very much a data science-led solution. That's our company. We didn't rush out to market with vanity metrics, and you called that word out. So from a measurement perspective, there's lots of folks in the market right now that have really pretty dashboards, but they're loaded with vanity metrics themselves. So what are the metrics they include that we also have to some degree in our platform? The biggest two measurements that people need to be aware of, one is citation count and citation quality, et cetera, and the other is mention. And so back to the definitions. So a mention is where a user would ask a question and the brand or branded term would appear inside that answer. So you've been mentioned. And then you start to count, and you can do all kinds of interesting calculations with that. The other big high-level metric is the citation, where you ask a question and then at the end of that answer is a citation. There can be multiple citations. And those links actually count. Kind of feels more like old search where you can click through and land on a page. So those are the two highest level metrics. Broadly speaking, for us, we track roughly 8 to 10 different levels below each one of those metrics. So we start to vary. You can almost visualize a tree with citation up top, and then we start to really assess and analyze location, quality, number, share of voice, etc., under each one of those core metrics. So when we talk about vanity metrics, we typically call out those metrics. Like those are, you need to know what they are, but there's not much you can do with them. So what do you do with your visibility is currently 20%, and now we move it to 25%. What do you do with that? Is that good? Should it have been 30? You don't really know. So making sure that the way you move from vanity is to make it actionable. And that's kind of one of the things that we focus on. The third metric that is very unique to us, which helps us to do the optimization work in a statistically sound way, is something called stability. And so if you ask a question in a large language model, you get back an answer. If you ask 1 second later the same exact question, you'll likely get a slightly different answer, or maybe even an entirely different answer. So that's the probabilistic nature of the model itself. So if you don't track enough volume at scale and you don't use the right math, your answers can vary a ton. So you're really, if you said today I ran the test and you're 25% visible, That doesn't mean much because that answer is likely not stable because you're not using most don't statistically sound kind of sampling techniques. And so every number that we produce in our solution, we wrap confidence intervals around. And we pay very particular attention to confidence intervals. And this would be something I would suggest that people, marketers, CMOs that are listening, that if they're using a solution, ask that question and pay attention to what is the confidence interval, plus or minus, around that answer. And you're likely there isn't one, right? I don't know what you mean, quite honestly, or there isn't one. And if they give you one, then you should then dig into how they're actually sampling to make sure it's valid. But using my co-founder and his data science team, that has been our absolute battle cry, if you will, to make sure we've got statistically sound numbers. So vanity, to me, to summarize, means that you have those higher level metrics largely, and you are not very actionable. You've got to get down to the detail to be actionable.
Now, if I think about the metrics you're talking about, some of that does require a bit of an understanding of data science and statistics, kind of some fundamentals there. What are some ways you would recommend that marketing teams, sales teams too, would need to understand some of this potentially? How might you upskill? What kinds of, would it be training courses, things that you could do so that when you're talking to your CEO or somebody else about confidence intervals, say, you don't get that imposter syndrome feeling of, I'm using words and I'm not really sure I know what they mean. Some people do, I think. Some people maybe have that training, but what if you haven't? And how do you get more conversant with the kind of language you're using with that data science?
Yeah, we have a number of, one, get a qualified data science around you. So a scientist around you, or someone who's steeped in traditional AI, things like ML and predefined algorithms, as well as kind of the new generative kind of AI as well. But when we bring folks on, how we onboard them, one, we look for that type of background, obviously. And two is that we put them into a series of different training classes, which really takes them through the fundamentals. And putting aside the word data science, the primary word to focus on is math. And so we do well with mathematicians because they really do need to fundamentally understand. And then we haven't hired statisticians, but with the data science piece, that's been the hyper focus to then move our solution towards. So taking stats classes. So we have courses through Coursera and others that we actually recommend. So these are classes available to everyone. And if you go into these platforms and you actually set up a program for mathematicians or data science or stats or all three, it will build a program for you and really train formally. What's interesting, we're talking about generative search, is you can go into generative search itself, into GPT, and say, I want to train like a data scientist, and it will put forward a very good program. So I think the data, the plan and the training is so accessible right now. There really is, outside of budget and the ability to hire FTEs, there really aren't any constraints on getting the right kind of people trained up. And it's so important. It is the tool now that people need to have inside their teams. And if you don't have it, then you really, really do need a platform that's kind of steeped in it.
Yeah, you certainly have the benefit, Todd, with your background, your unique background of having been in the business for 20-something years and having worked at Microsoft and now starting this IQ Rush area. I guess a couple things come to mind. One, you've probably had a lot of lessons learned of pitfalls or strategies on what works and what doesn't work on search. And then maybe just for the benefit of the audience too, kind of do a reset of your, what is your tool doing specifically? Is it monitoring those questions?
Yeah.
Like why do we need a tool like yours as part of the pitfalls?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, now I need 17 hours to talk about our solution. So why don't I walk through the flow of how the system works more generally, and I think that'll connect some dots. So and any marketer this is the process they need to run as well. So the first thing is preparing the queries that you're going to ask the machine. So how we generate those for you automatically. We ask marketers to tell us who are your competitors. So known competitors and their URLs, step one. Step two is give us your URLs that you want to assess and you want to be more visible for. You also can orient that question more towards product. I want this product to do well in the market. Okay, then we'll map that into URLs and we'll start to assess everywhere that product appears. So they give us the URLs, they give us product, branded terms as well. So we track those inside AI answers, mentions like I was describing. And we take all that data and we connect as well, I should say. We connect Google Analytics, Google Search Console as well to ground this. So now we have this pile of data, and marketers that have been doing this for a while have a lot of access to that data as well. But compiling the data and then generating the queries. This is the first pitfall as well. So when you create the queries, you need to have a valid statistical sample of what the queries would look like more generally from the public and submit those to large language models. So the biggest question and the biggest area we see people struggle with is the number of queries they produce. So ask me, please ask me good questions or clarifying questions if I disconnect some things. So for each topic, so for example, Nike might want to look at comfort in a running shoe. Okay, comfort is the topic they want to be known for. So that topic, we need at least 250 queries to be able to test the visibility and the valid visibility of that topic for Nike. If you do less, then you're kind of back to the probability of the model, and you're up and down, and the scores start to get a little bit questionable. If you do more, you will catch more URLs in the tail, but you really get most of your leading visibility scores, your competitor scores, and you find new competitors at 250 queries. And so we have lots of math. We've done lots of testing. We've tested 25 queries, 50 queries, and we all the way up to 250 and 10,000. And we can watch how often the brand and that topic start to appear, as well as the competitors. And again, we target that 250 number. It's reached stability at around 250. So one is we collect the data. Two is we then create the queries per topic. So let's assume that we have 2 topics, we've created 500, or 4 topics, let's say 4 topics, and we've created 1,000 queries. So 1,000 queries, then you need to submit those to each of the models. So this would go to ChatGPT, Gemini, and all Perplexity and all the other models as well. So you ask 1,000 questions and you get back 1,000 answers. If we did 3 models, now we have 3,000 responses. We have probably times 10 number of citations. And that's the data that you then start to assess. And that's where you start to generate the first view into a citation score. So Nike appeared from a cited perspective X number of times, 25% of the time. Or the branded terms of Nike and the one they gave us in particular, we found that inside those responses as well. That's what creates that first level. That sounds complicated, but it's done with our solution anyway. That's done in under 1 minute that you start to generate this data. But that's really at the vanity level at that point. It's interesting, but now what do you do with that? So maybe I'll pause right there. Did that make sense, that first step?
It did to me. And actually, you've anticipated my next question, which is, I'm guessing you'll have some, in particular in B2B, some brands that maybe they're newer, and haven't had sort of that track record that would be picked up by an LLM. Maybe they're not showing up the way they want to in those queries.
Absolutely.
And that comes out in those metrics that you just described. What are some of the main actions you find you're recommending to brands sort of over and over again based on that first line of defense type of citation research?
So once you get those citation scores, you can see what group you fall into. It's kind of like old advertising, traditional. There's the head, the torso, and the tail, and then not visible. So new tend to be not visible or kind of lowly visible in that third group as well. So there's 2 forms of recommendations that we give. One is technical. So what does the page look like? How many H1s? Simple things that you would know if you're a kind of more classic SEO. Metadata, structures, tags, etc. So there's a technical component. So we call that machine readable stuff in the page. The other one is content. So what content have you written? How is it structured? Word choice, word order, logical groupings of the sentences, all of these, the readability, all of these things matter to the machines too. So one bucket is human readable and the other one is machine readable. And within, I'll kind of get there, within the solution itself, and this is under 3 to 5 minutes now, we generate a roadmap for you, precise recommendations to go do. So you're not left with I want to be more visible. Now what do I do? And go tinker around. We tell you exactly what to do. And you could sort the recommendations on level of effort or impact, depending on your resources. You might want to attack those easy ones first, for example. Or if you've got great resourcing, that data scientist we talked about, you go big and you go for those more complex, heavy lifts. So on the process, we have these queries, we submitted them, we have the data back. Each one of those links at the end of a response, our machine goes and goes to those links, clicks and goes to those pages, and then crawls around the pages. So we have thousands, we've gone from 1,000 questions to 3,000 responses to 30,000 potential links, and we chase the links and we pull back the HTML. So now we're looking at all of this code is sitting in our database where our IP kind of runs up against it to find ranking factors. This is one of the big changes, is there are 108 we've identified proprietary factors these machines use, and they use them differently. Each machine is different. They use different variables. Each machine, where they do overlap, weight them differently in terms of importance, and they emerge and change over time. So within our system, we run that process I've described behind the scenes periodically so that we can keep our algorithms up to speed with how GPT is changing, for example. And so we have all that data, and we have one of the biggest databases in this space now that we can start to probe and find new insights. So we do that work, we score then all of that content. And this is another pitfall. So if you stop at scoring a website or a web page or a domain, you are so high level that is not helpful. And there's lots of solutions that do that. You need to go down into each page, and you need to go down into each sentence. And in some cases, you need to go down to characters and word choice specifically. So you can imagine all that data I talked about, all the HTML, the 30,000 sites, all this coming together. Then that's what our machines do. They go through and score individual sentences, individual web pages, and we call that web performance. And that's what you need to get to. The pitfall is you don't get there. You stay up at the really just at the web page level and those Uber scores. So what we show you then is, here's your web page. There are maybe 60 sentences on that page. And we can tell you if each question matched the intent of the queries that were submitted, and if there's a good match rate, if you were cited or if you weren't cited. So if you could be matched and not cited, a competitor got cited. So we have that URL. We show you what the competitor did, how they optimized, what that page looks like, and maybe the reasons they matched. And then you can infer, well, maybe I should do something different on my page. That finds its way into our recommendations as well. So I'll pause there real quick because it gets a little spaghetti oriented. but ask me any clarifying questions we have.
No, I think that makes a ton of sense. It sounds to me like, or what I'm hearing you say is, you're stack ranking kind of the process of what your competitors are doing versus what you're doing on certain search algorithms, whether it's B2B or not. You're able to do that in pulling from various machines, and all the machines are stack ranking it differently. It sounds like as well. Am I hearing that all correctly?
That's correct. Because one of the old traditional paradigms is there's really one search engine. Now you've got multiple search engines, and they're changing and growing. And by the way, they change from country to country as well. So you've got some I can guarantee the audience hasn't heard about that. For example, Slovenia is using, or France is using, for example. So you have many, many engines. Each one of those engines use the ranking factors differently, to your point. So yes, that's correct. It's actually, and then we take those factors, we identify them, and then we run this exercise. We find their Shapley values. This is back to the data science piece. We have actual plots that then form how we optimize per engine, per model, that shows the weight of the variable being used, the ranking factors, and we show if more is good or less is good. And we can help you navigate the exact weight, the exact factor, and how much more or less as well in the optimization. And that gets back to giving precise, actionable recommendations, not just your 25% visible, for example, and want to be more. Yeah. So when we get the recommendations that we've analyzed it, we get the recommendations that we're looking for. That's perfect. Then someone can take it a marketer can take that information and go implement the changes. When they implement it, then we track that. And so statistically and soundly, we track how their performance is evolving over time. We start tracking after about 2 weeks and then track every 2 weeks thereafter to find the changes. This gets back to stability and why it's so important. If you don't have stability, then when you're tracking it, you're likely tracking noise. This is the variability in the large language models, that probabilistic nature. If you have stability, then you're tracking signals that matter. So you separate the noise from signals that matter. So the tracking is much more effective as well. And so we do that over time for every job that a brand would run with us, and then they can run multiple jobs. And you can kind of almost visualize a stacking, a job, optimization, monitoring. And we sort of just let the brands keep working that way effectively. So they can take those recommendations and implement, or they can go to our experimentation platform. And this is one of the parts that makes it certainly very unique. I think we're the only company that has this, which is you can take your web page, you can load it into the experimentation piece. You can take your own blog, say a blog you haven't produced. You really want to know how is a large language model going to view this blog. You can put that copy in there, and then you can hit run. And when you hit run, you effectively test it and score it from top to bottom in whatever model you wanted to use, those variables. And we give you scores across the board. We have, again, 108, but we show the 20 most important for each model inside the system. We're tracking the rest of it as well behind the scenes. And so you can see before and after scores initially, then you make a change on the copy, and then you can see the score after. And you can kind of see how you're trending, and you can kind of play with these dials to get your content honed. Once it's honed, then we give you a visibility prediction. And so with the change factor, we have a 92% accuracy in how well we predict visibility. So for example, on Perplexity, we can see you changing variables. We can see the content getting better and better and scoring better and better. When we get there, we then predict visibility. We have 92% accuracy. And our big belief there is marketers need to know before they publish and before they go. We don't need to do the SEO cycle of let's write new content and let's wait a month, 6 months, whatever it would be, to see if it actually worked. You can do it in near real time. It can take 2 to 3 minutes to cycle through each test cycle. But we're pretty proud of the experimentation piece. So that's kind of the beginning to end how the solution works. The marketer experience on that is takes 3 to 5 minutes to kind of work through the entire process. And then they can keep playing with the experimentation piece for as much as they want.
Quick follow on to that, related to the different LLMs and the experimentation. Are there any 2 or 3 nuggets that you could give the audience on what we should be doing with our content, either video or long form content, to rank into your product and any product that's looking at kind of the assessment of LLMs and where your stack rank relative to competitors? Any suggestions that you have?
Absolutely. So number one would be that authority still matters. So everyone I talk to, all our clients are, what's the most important thing? And they always seem to go down on authority. Authority is not the most important factor anymore. And I question, even in the SEO world, traditional, where we've done mathematical analysis of how well SEO works, I even question the importance that listicles and expert opinions put on it. But so authority doesn't matter as much. Roughly, it matters 26% less than it was in SEO. That's not roughly. That's relatively precisely, it's 26% less. But what makes it even more interesting or complex is each one of the models values it less. So Perplexity values authority less than GPT does. So if you're a new brand and you really want to focus on structure and you don't have this authority, Perplexity is a good model to be targeting to start your visibility. First, the GPT is more focused on trusted brands, entity recognition, and the authority is weighted more there. That's one. 2 is similarity matters a ton. So lexical similarity or semantic similarity. And semantic similarity is word choice. So when you asked a question in your conversational query, did you get a word match? So that sounds more traditional, search oriented, but it's not just keywords, it's all of the words. Then there's lexical. Lexical is more the meaning of the sentence. Does the sentence intent map to the intent of the question itself? And then there's a way to combine them we do mathematically. We create a hybrid similarity number. So this is the way to think of them in concert, kind of working together. So similarity becomes very, very important. Similarity is one of the top, I think, the top ranking factor, and as we term it, bringing them together, hybrid similarity. But there are a ton, as I said, 108 different factors. And anyone who's interested in this, we're happy to share. We have a guidebook that shows you how to do generative search, sort of the process with a lot more detail I walk through. And we're also able to share some of the ranking factors and what they look like from model to model. Happy to share that as well.
Well, thank you for that, Todd. Appreciate it. And we'll definitely get that link out to people. Just to sort of start to wrap things up, since I know we're at time, this starts to feel like kind of an existential need for companies in terms of really understanding how they're getting found, where they're getting found, why they're getting found. And while I think it sounds like it shares the fundamentals of what we all know from SEO, it's not the same. To what degree do you think brands should be paying attention to this and really focusing on it versus other things in 2026?
Yeah, so I'd say SEO is not dead. I hear SEO is dead, SEO is dead. SEO is not dead. It's still an index that matters to the machine. It's just not quite as important as you would think. But so you still need to do SEO, but GEO becomes the most important to me factor, especially as it overtakes traditional search into 2028. And the fact that there is multiple models that these consumers, your consumers, are using, then you need to be able to work across all of these models as well. And so I'd combine that and say, SEO is not dead, keep doing SEO, but this is existential, in a way, to use your word, as we head into 2028. And despite all the complexity and all the math and science behind it, solutions do wrap themselves around that. And in just a matter of minutes, you can get to a precise set of recommendations that you can work. So yes, it's existential. Yes, it's new, but it doesn't need to be complex.
Excellent.
We actually got a last question asking about hallucinations and how they can handle that when you're fine tuning or building an LLM.
So if someone's tuning a large language model, so I should say this, we actually have fine-tuned large language models to emulate GPT, Perplexity, etc. So when we're doing the work in the experimentation work, we're using our own large language models. So that also is much more effective than using the commercial models itself. And so there's an entire process you should use to train for emulations. There's a series of epochs you need to run. The data sets matter. Your starting data set matters. Your training set data set matters, and then how you run those epochs. And actually, if that person wants to talk, I'm happy to connect them with our data scientists. We have a person who leads the training of our models. If it is the hallucinations in the responses themselves, then that's where stability matters and statistical validity and scale. So we see the hallucinations, and so but we can identify that as noise and kind of remove that from how we train our models as well.
That was an excellent question, Samkisha. Hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Thank you for asking that. And Meg, thanks for flagging that, because I would have missed it had you not mentioned that. So I know we're a couple minutes over time here. Maybe just to wrap things, Todd, any closing thoughts that we may have missed today? I know we went through a lot of different things of generative search, from definition to LLM metrics to how different LLMs measure, but anything else as a closing thought?
No, well, yes. One other point. I think marketers might want to fold back to traditional. We have one engine to optimize for. Now you have many engines that you need to optimize for. So be sure to when you think about optimizing, that you understand how each one of those works, so that you can maximize it. And there is a technique for cross-model optimization as well that we didn't get into. But yep, it's a new world, existential, but it's a huge opportunity for new brands to get up and more visible.
There you go. Risk and opportunity all in one. Sounds like what we usually hear at the beginning of a new year with a 2026 twist on it. We'll have to have you come back and share more next year.
I look forward to it. I love it.
Todd, well, thank you for spending your time, investing your time with us. If we'll flip that link over into the live show notes, and this is a wrap for 2025. So with that, we're ending on a very positive note with this exceptional content on generative search, and look forward to seeing everybody in the new year.
Thank you much. I appreciate it.
Happy Friday.